Yet for the Egyptians, the nightmare of their Sinai retreat was not yet over. Wednesday, June 7th, 1967. The Six-Day War was barely 2 days old, and the Egyptian army was disintegrating in the Sinai Desert. Yet even in the searing heat of early June, the Israeli advance showed no sign of letting up. How could two armies, both used to such conditions, perform so differently? These Israeli paratroopers are preparing for a training march in the middle of summer. It's vital they're able to keep going in the blistering heat.
The first few days that I joined the army, there was a heat wave. It's like getting boiled in an oven, especially in the desert.
Before the march starts, the platoon medic checks the conditions his soldiers are going to encounter.
When soldiers are on the march, they have to drink about between 5 to 6 liters before the march. They start 6 hours before, and they drink every hour 1 liter.
Strict water drinking regulations were implemented by the Israeli army in 1959. Up until that point, the need for soldiers to avoid dehydration was appreciated only by medical officers such as Ezra Sohar.
In these days, the army used to issue 1 liter of water per day per soldier.
Sohar and a team of military medics decided to conduct a unique experiment with a group of soldiers by marching the entire length of Israel in August, the hottest month of the year. Every day, they covered 17 miles, with hourly rest breaks to take on water.
We found that a person in a very hot area, if he works physically, the amount of sweat can reach up to 20 liters a day. So to make up for it, we suggested that they drink 1 liter every hour.
By the end of the march, the benefits of regular water intake were plain to see.
These soldiers, they were in excellent condition. They said, we are ready to continue indefinitely. The difference was the drinking.
After the 1959 experiment, Army water regulations were changed from 1 liter of water per soldier per day to 1 liter per hour when soldiers were on the march. Cases of heat stroke and dehydration virtually disappeared.
Napoleon said the army walks on its stomach. This is perhaps true in Europe. In the Middle East, the army walks on its water.
When war came in 1967, the Israelis knew that ensuring water supplies would be vital. This contrasted starkly with the situation in the Egyptian army.
The retreating Egyptian army did not carry much water with it. Thousands, or perhaps even 10,000s, of Egyptian soldiers died during 1967 because they lost their units and they were cut off from water supplies.
They have to walk 200 kilometers. No sleep, no food, no water, no medicine, nothing at all.
It's likely that in the Sinai, the Egyptians suffered more casualties to heat than to enemy action. By Friday, June 9th, the Egyptians had been driven back across the Suez Canal. Israel had captured Jerusalem and the West Bank from Jordan after 2 days of bitter fighting. Yet the Israeli and Syrian armies had still not engaged. The theater of war would now move to Israel's northeast border with Syria, the Golan Heights. This mountainous area was vitally important because it gave Syria a near-impregnable defensive position.
The Syrian exploits the nature of the Golan Heights. It's very steep, and they use the slope to build 3 lines of fortifications.
To have any chance of success against the Syrians, the Israelis needed to concentrate all their available forces.
The most important factor there was that the Israelis had already finished with both the Egyptian and the Jordanian fronts, and they had diverted all their power to the Syrian front.
This rusting, shell-splintered half-track testifies to the bloody struggle that occurred here. But by Saturday, June 10th, Israel had taken the Golan Heights. Much of that success came down to the Israelis' ability to hit concealed Syrian artillery positions. How did they know where to strike? The answer lies in the extraordinary story of Eli Cohen, Israel's most famous spy. In 1961, Cohen's brothers Abraham and Morris were kept in the dark about his real life.
We didn't know exactly what he is doing abroad, but we do know that Eli is doing something for the government.
Cohen was working undercover in Syria for Mossad, the Israeli secret service.
We needed desperately to have somebody to work for us there, to give us information when they will attack us.
And Cohen's upbringing in Egypt helped maintain his cover.
He was a Jew who came from an Arab country, and he knew very well Arabic.
Cohen, Agent 088, was known in Syria as Kamal Amin Tabet. He became close friends with General El Hafez, the president, and incredibly was appointed a member of the country's high command.
He was given a free hand and access to all the positions everywhere. He was even escorted by military commanders to visit positions, and he had drawn detailed plans.
So secure was his access that he was able to pose for this photograph during a visit to the Golan Heights with Syrian military officials. All the while, he was gathering valuable information for his real bosses. But Cohen's luck would soon run out. In January 1965, he was caught sending a coded transmission from his home in Damascus.
I think that this lemon was squeezed too hard, and this is why he was found.
Cohen was interrogated by Syrian intelligence, tortured, and put on public trial.
I thought that the Mossad will succeed to rescue him.
Then suddenly they said they're going to hang him.
On May 18, 1965, the Cohen family watched in horror as his execution was broadcast live on Syrian television.
We lost our world. We didn't know what to do.
But what had Cohen's espionage actually achieved? One famous story recounts that after Cohen's tour of artillery positions on the Golan, he made a strong recommendation to the Syrian High Command.
He says those guys are suffering from sunburn and heat casualties. We must do something to protect them from the sun. Nothing is too good for our boys in the field. Plant trees by every artillery emplacement. And they do. They plant trees by every Syrian artillery emplacement on the Golan Heights. And the Israelis watch these trees growing up, telling them exactly where every Syrian artillery emplacement is.
Can this story really be believed? 40 years after Cohen's death, his brothers have come to the Golan Heights in search of evidence.
It's very exciting to be here, in the very spot that Eli walked here with the Syrian delegation in the border.
They found what they believe was one of the Syrian fortified positions their brother visited. This vast complex of hidden bunkers is still intact.
You see, this is another bunker. This is another one. All around the area, there is many bunkers.
You see this eucalyptus tree?
Yeah.
Perhaps Eli suggested to plant them here as a shelter from the sun here for the Syrian soldiers.
Tellingly, the Golan slopes in this area are virtually bare. But around the bunker complex today, there are many mature eucalyptus trees. This would suggest that Eli Cohen succeeded in helping the Israelis to pinpoint Syrian artillery positions.
He had sent to the Israeli military detailed plans of where the positions are, and the number of troops there. And in fact, they had known almost everything about the Syrian forces in that area.
Though Cohen died 2 years before the Six-Day War, he undoubtedly influenced its outcome. Yet even with this invaluable intelligence, much more blood would be spilt before Israel had conquered the Golan Heights. This is a memorial to some of the Israeli soldiers who were killed on the unforgiving terrain of the Golan Heights. For Israel, this would be the most difficult part of the Six-Day War.
The Golan Heights are covered with big basalt boulders, big volcanic boulders. They're naturally occurring tank traps.
How did the Israelis overcome such obstacles? Intelligence had revealed exactly where the most difficult terrain lay. So a route of attack was chosen to both avoid the tank traps and surprise the Syrians.
The concept was to use such a path to penetrate in between the Syrian positions and to attack the all three lines of defense simultaneously.
Many Israeli armored vehicles advanced down this very track, but then disastrously took a wrong turning.
One battalion, the battalion of 8th Armor Brigade, lose from 26 tanks, 24 tanks. They had 13 killed in action and about 33 wounded.
After 4 days of astonishing success, the war was now proving very costly for Israel. One of the most difficult objectives was Tel Fahir Bunker, a bewildering complex of concrete-covered trenches, bristling with heavily armed Syrian soldiers determined to hold out. How did the Israelis manage to take such a strong defensive position? A particular kind of weapon would come to the fore.
The submachine gun was one of the all-round useful weapons of the Second World War. It provides a lot of firepower in close quarters, and sometimes that's just what you need.
So impressed were the Israelis with this weapon that they invented their own version, the Uzi 9mm. In the Tel Fahir bunker, this submachine gun would come up against the legendary Kalashnikov, the AK-47.
Both of them will fire around about 600 rounds a minute, which is 10 a second. Both of them will hold anything between 20 to 30 rounds.
How do these weapons compare in an accuracy test? McIntyre is firing at a target 50 meters away. 5 shots from each gun. All the rounds hit the target, but only the AK-47 gets close to the center of the black.
The AK has the advantage that you can hit the target at a much longer range, and the ballistics are still lethal at those ranges. The 9mm really falls short of that and wouldn't be lethal at anything more than 100 meters.
But in the close-up fight at Tel Fahir bunker, long-range accuracy was not the deciding factor. It was smooth handling in a tight space that was more important. So how do these two weapons compare in a trench combat test? First, the Uzi. It's easy to use and quick to reload. Then the AK-47. It's powerful but slower to bring to bear than the Uzi, and reloading is not the same smooth process. In this test, it even jams.
The Uzi is much better in confined spaces, much more pointable. This is much more like a traditional rifle. The AK